Race Remix.
Welcome to Echoes of Movement. In this podcast series, we will explore how sounds stir memories, what we connect in our subconscious, and how these play into transmitting beliefs across cultures through travel. I'm Elana, and welcome to the first Echoes of Movement chapter. I'm so glad you're here today. In this chapter, we will dive into the subjective side of sound and music and how they correlate to memory. A recent study in BMC neuroscience has given new insights into the role of emotion in musical memory. Because emotions enhance memory processes and music evokes strong emotions, music could be involved in forming memories either about pieces of music or about episodes and information associated with particular music. This is also true for sounds. These dove sounds bring me back to when I would travel to Scottsdale, Arizona with my family. I remember waking up in the morning and being so excited to go swimming with my sisters, and the wait was absolutely horrible. I remember sitting on the balcony so I wouldn't wake up my mom or my dad, who were still asleep, and in the background, I could just hear the bird sounds. As I think back to that time, the chirping still rings in my ears. Sounds like these remind me of my family and the connection that one can have to the larger community. For me, this instills a sense of belonging among my sisters. For others, this might be something that completely is different. But I want us to focus on the fact that sound has meaning and memories. Not all sounds have to carry happy memories. Sounds of the ocean can elicit fears, some that others may share. For instance, my fear of the ocean stems from sea turtles. I know that is silly, but this is something that remains with me and will stay in my memory. For others, this might be a fear of sharks in the water or the mucky sand in between their toes. Sound eliciting fears is a regular occurrence that can't be diminished. Maybe sounds are important, but music has just as much impact. Whenever it came close to Christmas time, my mom would always sing Silent Night. Whenever I hear that song now, it brings me back to her singing to me as a child. What sound or song provokes a core memory in you? I hope you enjoyed the first chapter of the Echoes of Movement series, talking about sound and memory. I'm Elana, and thank you for listening.
Now that we've heard from Alana about how sounds and music can be so important in one's life, we can consider our own experiences with sound. Consider the sounds that remind you of childhood, of being on the school playground, or riding on the school bus. Something that may be consistent with these memories is the charter of people talking. What language are they speaking in? Is there more than one? In this next episode, we are going to explore how language can affect a sense of belonging. Hello, welcome to chapter 2 called Overtime. My name is Adrianna, and today I'm going to discuss about language and if language can affect the sense of belonging. Today I am going to interview my mom, and I am going to get her take on language and if she ever felt a sense of displacement or a sense of belonging. Hope you enjoy.
How many language or languages do you speak? I speak one.
surrounded by?
Spanish, English.
Was there any place where, or did you get a feeling where you had to switch to Spanish or have to try to understand Spanish?
Times in my life where I had to figure it out, and especially working retail, you have to adapt, and you start learning that way, which is the hard way, but that's where I started learning. And then, throughout my years of different employment, same thing. You have to know at least a little bit of Spanish just to get by.
Was it difficult at first?
At first, yes. It was very difficult because growing up, it wasn't pushed on us. So I turned 6, they were trying, and then Grandma and Papa, it was just kind of like, they just didn't think about teaching it so much. So yeah, it's been difficult, especially going to school. Elementary, they're like, they see how you look and they expect you to know it. I think it would be different. I think it would be accepted in different circles. Sometimes I get the sense maybe when you would feel a little more accepted by, Hispanics or people from Mexico, because we're discriminated if we don't know it, and it's kind of like, why don't you know it, kind of thing. So.
How does that play into what's considered normal?
That's just the way things are, right? It's just like if we were to go to Mexico and we wanted people to know what we were speaking. They would look at us and expect us to know Spanish, English. It's like we see Mexicans from Mexico come here, we expect them to know English. It goes both ways. It's very isolating. It can be like, you just get frustrated, you don't want to be part of that circle anymore because you get so much negative feedback when you're trying. So it gets to the point where you don't want to learn that language, divert it away from wanting to speak that language. So we don't need, in a sense, we kind of reject that group, that circle, because they've rejected us before we even could try.
What was your first job like when someone spoke to you in Spanish and you didn't really understand it?
I remember it was my first job and I was so young, so I think I was cashiering and somebody, they wanted something. I didn't understand them. I really wasn't trying to be rude to them. And I was really trying to help them, but I obviously couldn't because I didn't know what they were saying. So I had to find somebody that could help. And, talking shit is a universal language. So you can tell when somebody's bashing you. And I think that was the first taste of it I had. And it kind of just set me down that path of that little hit of bitterness toward them, because you don't have to be aggressive. I didn't ask you to come here. It's just that common decency, that human decency that people seem to lack, especially if they think you look a certain way. I know it's something that I want to do, but people were just so rude about it that I really didn't want to learn it for quite some time, not until your great Nana died. Pretty weird is that she only spoke Spanish, but yet somehow we were able to somewhat communicate, and so I think once she died, I felt like I had an obligation to learn it. Not necessarily my top choice, but I know I should do it.
Because I get those faces too, and I understand what they're saying with their gestures. If I speak Spanish, they're like, no, and then they look at my name tag and they're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, are you Hispanic? I was like, yes.
That's what a lot of girls I used to work with when I was younger, because we could pass as both, right? Native American and Hispanic or Mexicana or whatever they want to call us. So a lot of girls used to say, I'm Native American, just to get them off their back, and they'll be like, oh, okay. And they'll leave them alone. And I'm like, damn, that's a good excuse. Not lying, because technically we are, but we lean more toward the other side.
DNA, 1%, but we are.
Yeah. It's there.
Well, Thank you for sharing your point of view.
Well, I hope you enjoy this chapter. I just want to give a big thank you to my mom for sharing her point of view, but also thank you for listening. Now that we've heard from Adrianna about language and how it can affect one's life and sense of belonging, we must understand that everyone speaks different languages and has felt a sense of displacement at one point or another. But what if that sense of displacement was purposeful? The next episode will discuss how distancing ourselves and our culture through travel can create space of reflection, allowing individuals to put their home into a broader perspective.
ANA6 便ロサンゼルス行きをご利用の栗畑様、栗畑しおり様、お伝えしたいことがございます。恐れ入りますが、ご搭乗券、パスポートをお持ちの上。
For some audiences, these sounds may be foreign. For others, you may hear them at least 2 times a year or more. The sounds of travel can bring about many memories, anxieties, and joys. Thank you for listening in to Echoes of Movement. This is Chapter 3, Culture Across Borders, and you are with Alysa. Sounds such as these may be very recognizable. That's because around 86% of Americans have flown on a plane at some point in their lifetime, according to a survey by Ipsos through Airlines for America. But what about traveling outside of the United States? While much of our public is interested in exploring new countries and their cultures, less than 50% of all Americans have passports. Now, I'm not saying we haven't made progress in exploring the world beyond U.S. borders. After analyzing data from the U.S. Department of State, we have made great strides in increasing the number of people who travel internationally. There has been an increase of almost 285% in the amount of passports issued each fiscal year since the year 2000. And excluding heavily impacted COVID-19 years, we have seen an increase in the number of American citizens visiting international regions. And okay, I know that this seems like a lot of numbers thrown around just to prove a point, which, yes, it is that. But it's been said that Americans who travel internationally stand out in their views and knowledge of foreign affairs, a point I want to discuss just a bit more. In 2022, I spent a semester studying abroad in France, and it was a great experience. I bumped up the number of countries I'd been to in my life to at least 10. I met a lot of great people and no doubt learned some things about the European culture. One of the biggest culture shocks was just how involved in global affairs everyone seemed to be. To my borrowed French family, borders seemed to be just a construct. What was happening in the country two over or across the Mediterranean was nearly as important as what was happening in their own capital. We heard about earthquakes decimating cities in Turkey, French protests against laws changing the retirement age, and bombings or missile threats happening throughout the Middle East. I've never felt like I'd been kept in a fishbowl, but after jumping out of the water into a bigger pond, I could start to notice some things. I noticed that largely as Americans, we are kind of self-centered. The local news outlets tend to pay attention to what is happening in our direct community, sometimes the surrounding states, and the larger U.S. cities. Our borders end up keeping us enclosed, even if they're designed to keep others out. With the ever-changing policies around borders in our country, we should just be thinking, what if? What if we cared about our neighboring countries just as much as our neighboring states? What if we had a greater number of citizens with passports who could travel internationally? What if those of us who are well-traveled stood up and enacted a change in the ways that the media captures global news? What if?
As we come to a close of the series through sounds, memories, languages, and borders, it is clear that the world we live in is formed by more than just places we live. It is shaped by echoes of sounds we've heard, words we've spoken, places we've been to, and music that has guided us through time and space. Thank you for listening to Echoes of Movement.